Hey everyone, it's Alex, and I am back with another video in my video series about the 70th Annual Tony Awards. And this time I'm covering the actual Tony Awards nominations. Now, the 70th Annual Tony Awards are happening this very Sunday on CBS at 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time and will be hosted by James Corden. Now, the Tony Awards are a unique award show for me because they're the one award show where I haven't actually seen any of the nominees. The Tony Awards, of course, honor the best of Broadway theater each year, and if you want to actually see a Broadway show, you actually have to go down to New York City to the theater that the show is playing at. And in my life, I have only ever seen one Broadway show. I live in Honey I Falls, New York, near the city of Rochester, which is probably about 7 or 8 hours away from New York City if you go by car. And I've only been to New York City once in my lifetime. I went to New York City in 11th grade with my drama club. We took a day trip there to go see a Broadway show. And that show was called The Drowsy Chaperone, which was basically a parody of 1920s musicals. It was one of those musicals within a musical. It was really, really funny, and it was a really good show. And we actually got to go backstage and meet one of the actors, Danny Burstein, his name was. Very nice guy. He answered all of our questions, and it was cool just to meet him. And of course, at the time, I had no idea who Danny Burstein was, but I've since learned a lot more about him over the years, and he's had a pretty impressive career. And semi-spoiler alert, we may actually see Danny Burstein's name on this list somewhere. But as I said before, The Drowsy Chaperone was my first and so far only Broadway show that I have ever seen, simply because I don't live in New York City. And even if I did live in New York City, I know that Broadway shows can be extremely expensive. So I'd have to be working at a very well-paying job in order to be seeing a lot of these shows. But I do try to keep up with any theater news or theater buzz on any of the big theater news websites. I look for reviews of shows and see which ones have critics liked, which ones have critics not liked, which shows have done well at the box office, which shows have flopped at the box office. It's all the same stuff that I do for movies. And if shows will post clips on YouTube, then I will watch those so I can get a taste of what those shows are like. So after going over these nominations, I'm not necessarily going to do what I did in the past and talk about what I like and what I don't like about them. Because having not seen these shows, I can't truly comment on whether or not I think they're deserving. However, what I will do is that I'll analyze what seem to be the predicted nominees and what seem to be the shockers or out-of-left-field surprises. And now it's time to reveal the 70th Tony Awards nominations. Now, before I go into the Tony Awards nominations, I just want to give a little preview of what they're like. The Tony Award nominations are pretty similar to the kind of nominations you would see at the Oscars, the Emmys, the Golden Globes. There's honors for acting, directing, writing, costumes, sets, lights, music, the whole 9 yards. But what the Tonys do is all of the categories, for the most part, are split, so that there's 2 costume awards, 2 lighting awards, 2 scenic design awards, one for plays and one for musicals. And they also do the same thing for acting, where they have lead and supporting, or featured as the Tonys like to call them, in both plays and musicals. So while the Oscars have 4 categories for acting, the Tonys actually have 8 categories for acting. So they get to spread the wealth there a little more in terms of actors. But anyway, it's now time to get into the 70th Tony Awards nominations. And here they are. Best Costume Design of a Play: Clint Ramos, Eclipsed; Tom Scott, King Charles III; Jane Greenwood, Long Day's Journey into Night; Michael Crass, Noises Off. Best Costume Design of a Musical, Paul Tazwell, Hamilton. Jeff Mashi, She Loves Me. Ann Roth, Shuffle Along. Greg Barnes, Tuck Everlasting. Best Lighting Design of a Play, Jan Verzeveld, The Crucible. Justin Townsend, The Humans. Natasha Katz, Long Day's Journey into Night. Jan Verzeveld, A View from the Bridge. Best Lighting Design of a Musical, Justin Townsend, American Psycho. Howell Binkley, Hamilton. Jules Fisher and Peggy Eisenhower, Shuffle Along. Ben Stanton, Spring Awakening. Best Scenic Design of a Play, Christopher Oram, Huey. David Zinn, The Humans. Beowulf Borat, Therese Raquin. Jan Verzeveld, A View from the Bridge. Best Scenic Design of a Musical, S. Devlin and Finn Ross, American Psycho. David Correns, Hamilton. David Rockwell, She Loves Me. Santo Loquasto, Shuffle Along. Best Book of a Musical. Now, the book of the musical is basically the story of the musical, not necessarily just the dialogue in between the songs, but rather the whole story structure of the show from beginning to end. Steve Martin, Bright Star. Lin-Manuel Miranda, Hamilton. Julian Fellows, School of Rock the Musical. George C. Wolfe, Shuffle Along. Best Choreography, Randy Skinner, Dames at Sea. Hofesh Schechter, Fiddler on the Roof. Andy Blankenbuehler, Hamilton. Sergio Trujillo, On Your Feet. Savion Glover, Shuffle Along. Best Orchestrations, August Eriksmoen, Bright Star. Alex Lacamoire, Hamilton. Larry Hockman, She Loves Me. Daryl Waters, Shuffle Along. Best Original Score, Music and/or Lyrics written for the theater, Bright Star, music by Steve Martin and Edie Brickell, lyrics by Edie Brickell. Hamilton, music and lyrics by Lin-Manuel Miranda. School of Rock, the musical, music by Andrew Lloyd Webber, lyrics by Glenn Slater. Waitress, music and lyrics by Sarah Bareilles. Best Featured Actor in a Play, Reed Birney, The Humans. Bill Camp, The Crucible. David Furr, Noises Off. Richard Golding, King Charles III. Michael Shannon, Long Day's Journey into Night. Best Featured Actress in a Play, Pascal Armand, Eclipsed. Megan Hilty, Noises Off. Jane Howdyshell, The Humans. Andrea Martin, Noises Off. Sakon Sengblow, Eclipsed. Best Featured Actor in a Musical, Daveed Diggs, Hamilton. Brandon Victor Dixon, Shuffle Along. Christopher Fitzgerald, Waitress. Jonathan Groff, Hamilton. Christopher Jackson, Hamilton. Best Featured Actress in a Musical, Danielle Brooks, The Color Purple. Renee Elise Goldsberry, Hamilton. Jane Krakowski, She Loves Me. Jennifer Simard, Disaster. Adrian Warren, Shuffle Along. Best Actor in a Play, Gabriel Byrne, Long Day's Journey into Night. Jeff Daniels, Blackbird. Frank Langella, The Father. Tim Pigott-Smith, King Charles III. Mark Strong, A View from the Bridge. Best Actress in a Play, Jessica Lange, Long Day's Journey into Night. Laurie Metcalf, Misery. Lupita Nyong'o, Eclipsed. Sophie Okonedo, The Crucible. Michelle Williams, Blackbird. Best Actor in a Musical, Alex Brightman, School of Rock the Musical. Danny Burstein, Fiddler on the Roof. Zachary Levi, She Loves Me. Lin-Manuel Miranda, Hamilton. Leslie Odom Jr., Hamilton. Best Actress in a Musical, Laura Benanti, She Loves Me. Carmen Cusack, Bright Star. Cynthia Erivo, The Color Purple. Jessie Mueller, Waitress. Philippa Soo, Hamilton. Best Director of a Play: Liesl Tommy, Eclipsed. Joe Mantello, The Humans. Rupert Gould, King Charles III. Jonathan Kent, Long Day's Journey into Night. Ivo Van Hove, A View from the Bridge. Best Director of a Musical: John Doyle, The Color Purple. Thomas Kail, Hamilton. Scott Ellis, She Loves Me. George C. Wolfe, Shuffle Along. Michael Arden, Spring Awakening. Best Revival of a Play: Blackbird, The Crucible. Long Day's Journey into Night. Noises Off. A View from the Bridge. Best Revival of a Musical: The Color Purple. Fiddler on the Roof. She Loves Me. Spring Awakening. Best Play: Eclipsed by Danai Gurira. The Father by Florian Zeller. The Humans by Stephen Karam. King Charles III by Mike Bartlett. And finally, Best Musical: Bright Star, Hamilton, School of Rock the Musical, Shuffle Along, Waitress. And those are the nominees for the 70th Annual Tony Awards. One thing I forgot to mention before reading the nominations is that every year on Broadway there's always a mix of new plays and musicals versus revivals of old plays and musicals, in case anybody was confused by some of the titles as I was reading them out. So that's why you've heard things like Hamilton mixed in with Eugene O'Neill's Long Day's Journey into Night. Alright, so based on all the theater news I've read over the past year, what was no surprise to me? Obviously Hamilton. That musical, of course, has been garnering lots and lots of praise and just coverage in general because it's been hailed as one of the most groundbreaking musicals ever. If you have no idea what Hamilton is, it's a musical about the life of Alexander Hamilton and his mark on American history. And the musical also features several of the other founding fathers, such as George Washington and Thomas Jefferson, and the villain of the musical is King George III of England. But here's the interesting catch that has helped propel Hamilton into the spotlight. The vast majority of the characters, while being white in real life, are actually played by Black, Hispanic, and Asian actors. Now there are some white actors in the cast of Hamilton too, but the vast majority of the actors in that show are not white. And Alexander Hamilton is played by none other than the show's creator himself, Lin-Manuel Miranda, who is of Puerto Rican descent. And when asked why he wanted to present the founding fathers when asked why he wanted to have the founding fathers be played by non-white actors, he said he wanted to create a show that represented America, what it looks like today. Because of course in the 1700s, America was not as racially diverse of a country as it is now. Like I said before, this show has just received critical rave upon critical rave, with virtually every theater critic putting it on their 10 best theater shows of 2015. I believe Ben Brantley of the New York Times, who's considered probably the most powerful theater critic in America, he put Hamilton as his favorite show of 2015. So that's really got to be saying something. And I did get to see a snippet of Hamilton earlier this year when they performed live via satellite on the Grammy Awards, because they were nominated for Best Musical Theater Album. And I believe that was the very first time they had a Broadway show perform on the Grammy Awards. And it was the very first time they had the category of Best Musical Theater Album presented on the Grammy Awards instead of at the Grammy Awards pre-ceremony, where they present a majority of the Grammy Awards, because on the Grammy Awards themselves, they like to squeeze in as many performances as possible. And even though I'm not really a big rap person, I really like the rap and R&B score that I got to see when the Hamilton cast was performing on the Grammys, so I may actually go out and buy the cast album for that show. And also, Hamilton recently became only the 9th musical ever to win the Pulitzer Prize for Drama. That award usually goes to just traditional plays, but Hamilton is one of the very few musicals to have won that honor. As to what else I'm not surprised by, I'm not at all surprised to see all this love for A View from the Bridge, even though that show closed months ago because it was only a limited engagement. It received a lot of high critical praise for its radical reimagining of Arthur Miller's vision when he first. But I'm not surprised to see it here because it received rave review upon rave review just like Hamilton, and it was so different from what you traditionally see in the presentation of an Arthur Miller play, where they had very simple costumes, practically no set, and almost no props. Pretty much the only thing that could hook you into the play were the actors speaking their lines, and from what I hear, this was one of those plays that just left you emotionally devastated by the time it was over. Critics said it was like being stripped naked to the bone, basically, is what some of them said. I'm not at all surprised to see all the love for She Loves Me. That's a revival of a musical from the 1960s, and that show too received tons of rave reviews and praise for everything from its acting to its choreography to its sets, its costumes, revivals of a musical. Same thing with The Color Purple, although The Color Purple is a unique case because this is one of those rare times where critics have said that the revival is way better than the original. When the original Color Purple came out 10 years ago, critics weren't exactly enthusiastic about it because they felt it was too long and too bloated. But with this new revival, apparently they cut half an hour's worth of material from the original show, and like A View from the Bridge, they really simplified everything with minimal sets, minimal costumes, really putting a lot of emphasis on the actors and their voices, because this is a musical version of the Alice Walker novel that later became a Steven Spielberg film starring Whoopi Goldberg and Oprah Winfrey before she became famous as a talk show host. And Oprah Winfrey actually produced both the original musical version of The Color Purple as well as this new revival. King Charles III also got a lot of high critical praise, and so did Spring Awakening, which is a revival of a musical that came out also about 10 years ago. This recent revival got a lot of people talking, got a lot of high praise from critics, because this revival did something very unique that you don't usually see in most theater productions. This revival of Spring Awakening did an interesting experiment where every role was played by two actors, one who was hearing and one who was deaf. The deaf actor would perform all the songs and dialogue in sign language, and the hearing actor would be the one speaking the dialogue and singing the lyrics. And I've seen some clips of how they were able to do this, and my word, it was just breathtaking. I can't imagine how much effort it would take to be able to choreograph hearing and deaf actors to be so in sync like that, but bravo to the creative team for this revival for doing that, because they made it look so seamless, at least from the clips that I saw. Like I said, I never got to actually see any of these shows, and unfortunately the Spring Awakening revival closed a few months ago because it was only a limited engagement, but they will be performing on the Tony Awards along with a lot of these nominees. And finally, the last two shows I'm not at all surprised to see on here are The Humans and Eclipsed. Those are considered the two main frontrunners for Best Play, and they've been receiving a lot of praise, first from their off-Broadway runs and now their Broadway runs. And both plays, I hear, tackle some pretty dark, serious subject matter, you know, the kind of subject matter that won't leave you feeling happy as you leave the theater, but they're those shows that make you feel glad for seeing them, to at least see the great acting, writing, directing, etc., etc. As for things I'm surprised by, I'm very pleasantly surprised for Shuffle Along. I've been hearing a lot of stuff about that musical. There was a lot of concern about that show because there were all these reports that the previews weren't going so well, that the show was too long, that a lot of stuff needed to be rewritten or taken out entirely. But thankfully, when Shuffle Along finally opened and critics got to see it, the response was pretty good. Not maybe on the same level of praise as Hamilton, but good nonetheless considering all the reports of trouble that had been on all the big theater news websites. But Shuffle Along impressed Tony voters so much that it's actually the second highest nominated show of the entire Tonys this year. Hamilton, of course, has the most nominations with 16, a record, by the way. No show has ever had 16 nominations before, but Shuffle Along came in second place with, I believe, 10 nominations. Other surprises? I can't really think of... I think the only other surprise in here is maybe Laurie Metcalf for Misery. Not that she was bad from what I hear. The stage version of Misery, you know, the Stephen King novel that was famously turned into a movie starring James Caan and Kathy Bates, and Kathy Bates won an Oscar for that movie for playing one of the best film villains in history, Annie Wilkes. This stage version of Misery kind of got a meh reception from critics. It starred Laurie Metcalf as Annie Wilkes and Bruce Willis as Paul Sheldon. And Bruce Willis wasn't exactly well liked by critics. But Laurie Metcalf, she was considered the one saving grace of that show, in which, and I believe many critics did praise her for not trying to rip off of Kathy Bates' performance from the movie. And a lot of times it's very common for award shows to honor the one good thing in a bad film or TV show or stage production. And in this case, the Tony voters decided, despite whatever flaws the stage version of Misery may have had, Laurie Metcalf was still worthy of an acting nomination. And that's all I can really say, just based on all the news I've read. Like I've said, this is not necessarily me voicing my total like or dislike for any of these shows, because I've not seen them all in full. But it should be a very interesting show, and it certainly is a lot different than what we saw at the Oscars earlier this year, because of course the Oscars had all-white acting nominees for the second year in a row, leading to the hashtag #OscarsSoWhite again. Hopefully that will not be the case next year, because there are a lot of great films coming out this year that feature a diverse range of actors who look like they're going to give stellar performances that deserve Oscar recognition. But Broadway has had from the reports I've read, its most diverse season ever. Because Broadway has had a lot of diversity problems like Hollywood too, with the demand for more representation across the board in terms of race, gender, sexual orientation, etc., etc. And it looks like they're certainly doing that, at least for this Broadway season. We'll see what happens in the next Broadway season, if it'll be as diverse as this one, but there's definitely no shortage of non-white acting nominees this time. In fact, I'm surprised there wasn't a Twitter hashtag of Tonys So Diverse. Maybe there was, but if there was, I don't recall it being reported on that much. But I guess that's probably because the Tonys don't get nowhere near as much coverage as the Oscars. Like, if the Tony Awards can get like 10 million people to watch, that's considered like a major achievement. Whereas the Oscars always have at least 35 million people watching each year. But it makes sense that there are a lot less people watching the Tony Awards because, unlike movies, the only way to really experience a Broadway show is to actually go to New York City to see one, whereas with a movie, you can watch a movie anywhere, in the movie theater, in your home, on your phone, etc. Well, that's all I have to say overall. I will definitely be watching the Tonys on Sunday night. I can't wait to see who wins, although at this point I'm pretty sure Hamilton's going to win a vast majority of its nominations. I will be back a few days after the ceremony to give you my review of the ceremony, and until then, I'll see you guys next time. Bye!